Coordinate. Do you mind fixing my bad thing? I don't know how this thing works. I just said this is it. Oh, yes. Okay, sweet. I was like, sweet too. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Make sure that we're streaming and recording and we can get started.
Okay, welcome one and all to the, what is this, April 27th installment of UIDRB. The next meeting is going to be, let's see, May 26th. No, that's the application deadline. That is going to be May 25th. Same place. City staff, shall I swear you in? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Lovely. Would you like to call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Fleming is not here now. He should arrive soon. Ms. Gunzelman? Here. Ms. Jones? Here. Ms. Parker? Here. Mr. Reeds?
Here.
Mr. Suplet?
Here.
And Mr. Szymanski is not present, but we do have a quorum.
Has everyone had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes from last month? Any revisions, modifications? No? Would you like to, do I hear a motion?
I would make a motion, please approve the minutes.
And I'll second that.
Motion second, Ms. Gunzelman?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Reeds?
Yes.
Mr. Suplet?
Yes.
Great, thank you, that passes.
Okay, first case, UID 23-04-005, 1444 North High Street.
Yes. So 1444 North High Street is on the corner of North High Street and 8th Avenue and will be the new location of the 8th and High apartment building. The applicant is seeking approval for three channel letter wall signs mounted within the sign band under the soffit. The signs are 20 inches tall and are LED illuminated with white acrylic and black and gold accents. And so if we look at their materials here, so this is a rendering of the site, and then this is the signage. So just on that main corner there, with the 8th on one facade, the High on the other facade, and then the in the middle. So you can see, it'll be mounted there. This is a site plan indicating where the sign will be located. See that corner at 8th and High. And then just an elevation indicating where the sign will be. And then materials, and then also you can see these mounting details in the section of how it will be mounted. More indications of size and color, and then some additional details. So after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends that wall signs be located within the sign band, be limited in size to a maximum width of 2/3 of the width of the building front, use lettering 8 to 16 inches tall, and that internally illuminated channel letters may be appropriate. Although the wall sign lettering is slightly taller than recommended, the location, scale, and lighting are consistent with plan design guidelines, and as such, staff recommends approval. And I wanted to know Keone's arrival as well. Thank you.
Is the applicant present? Step on up. I do need to swear you in though. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Would you like to add anything to the city's commentary on the proposed signage?
Not this time.
No? Does anyone have any questions on our side?
I just have an aesthetics question. Can you tell me about how you decided to have the half of the H in gold and the other half not?
Absolutely. I brought Christian here from Pod Design, who is the design firepower behind the sign. It will be
Firepower.
Yes, that is a very accurate description so far.
Yes, I'm just curious to understand what the importance of that is. If it signifies something.
So, I mean, one is just to add a pop of color, but there is a practical element to that. It also helps prevent birds from nesting in those kind of alcoves. So we tried to make sure that with it being mounted up on the ceiling, so that helps a lot. So this just allows a very minimal recess to prevent birds from nesting.
Okay, so where the gold is located, the recess is less. So
Correct.
is that right?
Yeah.
Is
so
that showing the section?
yeah. I'm not sure what page that is.
That is a shop drawing section toward the end of the package. Let's see.
But the gold is set in, but it's a matter of like an inch or so or something like that.
That's correct.
And then beyond that, it's purely aesthetic. Some design happened.
Yes, it picks up on, the idea of them kind of being a little bit scattered, picks up on the patterning on the building.
They are 2 inches inset from the face of the Letter Simpsons.
I don't have any questions. I think it looks nice.
Anything, Keone?
Yeah.
No?
All right,
Do I hear a motion?
I move we approve.
a second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Sutcliffe.
Yes.
Thank you, that passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So glad you asked.
Which brings us to UID 23-04-007, 122 West 9th Avenue.
Yes. We have the applicant here.
I don't know. Sir, are you the applicant for our second case? 122 West 9th Avenue?
With Rhythm Architecture?
That's Bradley. Bradley is,
Yeah.
Okay.
he might have gotten caught up.
So are you here for 1493 North High Street? Shall we just skip
Yeah,
one?
let's get on to that.
Okay, let's do that one. 23-01-09A.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so 1493 North High Street is located at the corner of West 9th Avenue and North High Street. The 0.59 acre site consists of 4 parcels which are developed with a 2-story brick mixed-use structure built in 1920, which was with a 1980 addition on the rear. A single-story commercial structure built in 1915, heavily modified in 1969, and a commercial structure built in 1943, heavily modified in 1973. The applicant is proposing to demolish all buildings on the site to construct a 6-story, 72-foot mixed-use building with 105 dwelling units and 135 beds, 3,000 square feet of commercial space, and a 48-space parking garage at grade accessed from North Wall Street. The structure will include a mix of studio, 1- and 2-bedroom units, as well as street trees along West 9th Avenue, covered by parking, a lobby, and amenity spaces. Exterior materials include brick, cast concrete, aluminum storefront, and glass. And then this is where there's a little update. So the applicant, there's a slight miscommunication. So the applicant is seeking conceptual feedback on the design, but they actually would like a vote on the variances this evening to get that process started. And so those variances that the applicant is requesting a vote on include permitted uses. So permitting residential uses only above certain commercial uses. The applicant is actually proposing 3,000 square feet of ground for commercial use on North High Street, with accessory residential uses on the remainder of the North High Street frontage as a part of the mixed-use development, with 105 dwelling units and structured parking with 48 spaces. And then second, to permit dwelling units above the structured parking and accessory residential uses without fully adjoining commercial uses on the North High Street frontage as specified. And then thirdly, to reduce parking spaces from 88 spaces to 48 spaces. And you can see the calculation there. And so the applicant last came before the board in February of 2023, where the board appreciated the inclusion of commercial space and recommended more. They acknowledged the importance of preserving contributing buildings with character, and some were curious to see a design that incorporated preservation, while others agreed that they could part with the existing contributing buildings if the architecture was excellent. The board was generally supportive of the proposed variances. Lastly, the board was confused by the vestibule design and recommended an entrance that was closer to the vertical access on the first floor. In response to board feedback, the applicant increased the first floor commercial space, removed the center vestibule on North High Street, and included separate commercial and residential entrances which puts the residential entrance closer to the vertical access, included darker materials on the upper stories in lieu of brick, included mixed materials on the front elevations, and included massing studies. And so submitted conceptual materials included variance listing, parking plan, typical residential floor plan, elevations, and massing studies. So if we take a quick look at those, here's the listing of variances. And again, this is an active case. It's, been confirmed with building and zoning services. I believe it's also gone through the University Area Commission as well. So these are the listing of those. And then in terms of design, you can see here, we have the parking summary. And then this shows the added commercial space. So this got expanded. You see here that we now have 2 doors, one at the corner of 9th and High, and then one for the commercial space, and then one further down High Street, which is closer to that vertical access for the residential portion. And then here's another typical floor plan. And then here we have elevations. So again, noting those 2 doors, we can note the differences in materiality with the darker materials on the top. And then this is the 9th Street facade. And then again, this is the alley facade, which is where the parking will be accessed from. And then this is the facade that faces south. And then this is the massing study that the applicant included. And so after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan, but is not consistent with recommendations for the preservation of contributing structures. The plan recommends the site for regional mixed use, which recommends adaptive reuse and/or expansion of contributing buildings, a minimum FAR of 1, max height of 72, and parking at 3.75 spaces per bed for residential uses. The plan's design guidelines recommend preservation and rehabilitation of existing buildings, and that High Street continue as a mixed-use corridor with the densest development. Furthermore, the plan recommends that new construction utilize high-quality materials, building articulation, a high level of transparency on the first floor, street trees, art, and lighting that minimizes light spill. Lastly, the plan calls for a building's height and mass to be mitigated with the use of setbacks, quality architecture, and materials. As such, planning supports the permitted uses and district limitation variances, but requests that the proposal incorporate an element of preservation as recommended by the plan. Planning requests that the contributing building circa 1920 at the corner of 9th and High be preserved and incorporated into the larger design. Planning also recommends the building be dynamically masked and articulated, with street trees along the North High Street frontage, a step back along the rear alley, a frontage above the 3rd story, landscaping, pedestrian amenities, and art murals on any blank walls. Additionally, planning encourages the use of townhome-style units on the 9th Street facade in order to activate that frontage. Planning would support additional height beyond that as which been proposed if the proposal were to include preservation and the other design elements requested above. Planning appreciates the inclusion of first-floor commercial space and the entrances on the North High Street facade. As the proposal develops, staff anticipates details on the materials, landscaping, and exterior lighting that addresses pedestrian activity while also minimizing light spill.
Thank you. I'd like to swear you gentlemen in, if I might. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you like to supplement anything the city's said regarding the project?
If I may,
Certainly.
okay, can we go to the first floor plan that shows the retail space? So I'd really like to focus on that and then the elevation piece of it. So based upon comments that we got from the first time actually that we were hearing, I appreciate the staff report, it was very thorough. We did take a hard look at that particular space from the retail space and try to make more of it. And then also, just looking at the functionality of it. And then from a future perspective, we do have 2 tenants or 2 entryways there, which is great, whether it's for the current use or for future use. But we also set it up, if you go to the elevations there for a second, the front elevation, we do have a kind of a center feature there because we have been actually looking at actual tenant fit out scenarios for that retail space. And so we're trying to incorporate some, I don't want to say patio space, but indoor, outdoor patio space that would connect and communicate with the neighborhood and with the sidewalk and pedestrian activity. So really from the right corner all the way down to about, well, say 2/3 down the way is all activated commercial space. We also, in the middle, right where the hand is right there, we did leave that architectural feature there. In the event that there ever wanted to be a third tenant, there could be a scenario where you have the residential entryway to the south, commercial establishment, to the north. And if needed, in the future, there's flexibility enough in the footprint that it can accommodate something like that in the future. That's not the current thought. The current thought is one tenant and the residential amenity spaces. But for long-term life of the building, we kind of looked at that as an option that we thought was good. It does help articulate the elevation a little bit more. And so from that perspective, I think those are the comments that we heard, and those are the responses that we took away in terms of looking at more commercial space, more activation on High Street, more storefront on High Street, and activating that corner at the north with a commercial tenant. Residential piece pretty much stayed the same. Parking pretty much stayed the same. We would like to have more parking to help it, but there's circumstances that drive that. So past that, that's changes that we've made. We are looking for a recommendation on the zoning so that we can continue to proceed forward on that aspect of the project. We certainly would like more feedback on the design as shown and the changes that we have made. So with that, I'm open to any comments that you have.
Lucas, if you would, could you go to Google Maps and go to Street View? Because one thing is about the comments about prototypes. I'd like to refresh my memory on what's there right now. Okay.
So I'm curious, I know last time you had mentioned that you had kind of reached out to, because obviously this is a place that means a lot to the community at the moment. So have you been able to, I know last time you had mentioned that you'd reached out to the owner of one of the businesses there, and then you were kind of waiting to hear back. Do you know?
I've spoken with two of them now. Two have expressed interest in the site, but it's the end user who's not been determined yet. We're still working through some things.
Sure.
Can I, going around, can I
Certainly.
make just what, probably an unnecessary clarification? Belkis mentioned that it had come to the commission. That deliberation and process has concluded with approval, or a positive recommendation.
With a variance request.
Yes.
Thank you.
UAC supported the variance.
Yeah.
So obviously the corner building, the original 1920 building, based on your current site plan, would eat into your garage, right? I mean, the depth is such that it's going to interrupt the functionality of the deck.
The garage, the deck, the residential above because of the existing height of the building, leasability of the space because it's 100 years old or whatever it is. It's not real conclusive to what tenants are expecting on today.
With this current plan, because you're wanting like conceptual ideas on design and stuff, I most likely would not vote yes at the moment, unless the variances that Belkis had kind of mentioned with, displaying public art on all the sides or trying to incorporate more street trees and lighting that I think is gonna have to be really visible and present in these mock-up drawings for me to really grasp the attention to community life that hopefully this place will be able to hold.
So when you say community art, what do you refer to? Because, the part of the requirement is that our frontage be storefront.
Sure, right.
How do you manage both of those?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I think, we could get the beats going a little bit louder, then I'll be able to rap it as we.
Yeah.
I'm trying. No, you're good. So for example, you could do murals across the front, that if you're thinking about like different districts that are within Columbus that have, really paid attention to how to incorporate local artists. That can be up for you all to kind of decide based on that, but I'm sure you can think about it in a creative aspect of,
We can, it's just that where there's limitations, you
We
know.
don't have a lot of blank
Right.
on High Street. Potentially down the Ninth Avenue side where some of the garage venting is. Obviously on the western facade, there's some space, but limited public access that we.
And there's a lot of precedents for that. The side streets have a lot of murals.
Yeah,
There's the Short
absolutely,
North, so
yeah.
that seems cool. I have a slightly different question. Did you get the answer you
Yeah.
needed to? Okay, so I have a slightly different question. So Belkis presented that there would be openness to other variances, including height, if the applicant was interested in and willing to keep what's considered a historic street run on High Street. You've all seen the changes to High Street, where we're getting a lot of generic, from my point of view, aesthetically, generic buildings. They look the same. They could go in any city. I see the elevation you've drawn. There's no context. Could be Indianapolis, could be Atlanta, right? I don't see Columbus in the image. Whereas the existing buildings there have been around long enough to have some identity. You know, the building that's further south, is it called the Jackson, that has the tower of housing that sits set back from High Street? Is that the name of it? Are you familiar with that housing project?
It's a condo project, if I remember correctly.
I think so. I think
It was
you're
one of
right.
the first.
Right. So I'm asking you this question, you know, with respect for the amount of time you've already put in the project, but have you looked at all at the possibility of building a taller building set back from High Street, thereby keeping the majority of the street front lower scale, so that what you get from High Street would be a stepped back condition and a very different kind of housing footprint? Not that it couldn't still be apartments if that's what your market is, but a building that would do that, we have a model on High Street, rather than produce another 5/1 that also requires removing an existing building.
So you're suggesting more height west, further back towards,
Exactly,
further towards the neighborhood rather than along High Street.
exactly.
So like a bar building, for lack of a better word, shows, you know, the second half, I mean, that is certainly a possibility. You know, I don't know what that would do to the neighbors to the west in terms of any kind of restrictions or criteria, pushbacks and so forth. It would definitely change the construction type, as you know.
Yep.
And that raises the cost of construction. So it starts to take it out. And that's the reason why you see all the multifamily projects that are 4/2, 5/1, whatever it is, because that type of construction is the most lenient, most cost effective.
Right,
And it fits the economics of
right,
the real estate development.
right. Also least imaginative and least sensitive to the historic nature of High Street. Just saying. It's an option, right? So.
It's not really an option. It's not economic.
It might be. How do you know?
Because
Have you
we've
studied
studied it 50 different times on different developments. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, we've been asked that question multiple times. You know, can we get more height? And the answer is yes, but here's the cost. And then that takes it back to the normal model that you see today. So it's a matter of economics. It's not a matter of design or architecture or preservations. It's a business economic issue.
But if you got more units, your land cost doesn't change depending. So if you're getting more stuff, does that not offset?
No, because you have to, you know, in simplest terms, it's cost per square foot and rent per square foot, because the two tie together at the front end and the tail end. And right now in Columbus, what I see anyway, I'm not a real estate person, I'm not expert in that. So, but what I do see is that, you know, I don't want to say rents are restricted, but the market drives the rent rate, right? And right now in Columbus, the rents aren't high enough to support that type of construction. And that's unfortunately a reality. You don't see that in other cities. You can go to Cleveland and you're seeing $3 a square foot on rent. Here, you know, it's 30% less. So it's a tough struggle, and I understand your point completely, and I agree with it. But there's a reality, and that's the hard tension between the two.
And are you planning to buy out the city's affordable housing component? Or are you planning to provide what the city's asking for in terms of affordable units?
We are planning to do the fee in lieu. The fee in lieu, so yes, the buyout.
Okay, I'm gonna raise some design concerns with what I see here. If you look at most 5/1 or 6-story buildings that are characteristic in cities all over the world for more than a century, we talk in compositional terms about base, middle, and front. Does that make sense? So usually there's a base dimension, which is a monumental floor larger than the typical floor to ceiling height in the upper levels, and how that's developed. In other words, how much is articulated to give the impression of that base. The top line doesn't have to be the floor line between the lower floor and the upper floor. Your upper level windows is going to have an impact on where you put that string course or that material change. Then when you go up through the rest of the building, there's usually an element of cornice or top element that has a compositional relationship that's different than a 4-2. So what I'm arguing here from an aesthetic viewpoint is that the way you've got the relationship between the top and the middle is, to me, not desirable or pleasing, nor is it consistent with a lot of conservative architecture that would usually have that proportion. And I could give you lots of examples of buildings, but it wouldn't take much to find what you like in that realm, and look at either a heavy cornice at the top, which was a traditional historic way to make a base middle top expression, or an upper floor that sometimes, it's doing things like setting back, having porches on the front or balconies, or things that make that top floor space different. And I'm not arguing for that. I'm only saying that's one of the examples of how you get a base, middle, top language or formal relationship of a facade.
This is staff. Since the applicant's seeking a vote on the variances, I'm wondering if maybe I could turn to that listing of variances and get a read on how folks feel about those variances, if they're feeling, supportive or maybe not, and some comments about those. Would that be?
Before we talk about aesthetics.
Yeah, just generally, would that be something we'd be?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
We can vote on the 3 together or 3 separately.
The 3 together. And if you all wanted to maybe give a quick synopsis of what these 3 variances are. I know I talked about them, but it's like parking, right? Is one.
Market is one, which we were trying to do without, but the conversation with commercial space kind of changed that directive, so that kind of forced us into having a variance there. The residential above commercial, it's a fairly standard requirement, these. And then what's the other one?
The high street frontage.
High street frontage.
So a reduction of, I believe that the code requires 80% of the high street frontage to be dedicated to commercial tenant space.
And you have instead.
It's roughly 40%.
Because of the residential, got it.
Yeah, 100% of coverage.
Oh, got it. I see what you're saying.
Parking, it's just no.
Right.
So I guess the question is, regardless of where we land on the design, understanding that can change and have ebb and flow, are we comfortable with these variances?
I have a question about the parking. So by code, how many parking spaces do you need?
135.
And you're,
It's 0.5 per bed within the restaurant space has some as well.
so code.
So we're reducing from 88 spaces to 48 spaces.
Okay.
I'll go away. I support the variances. I mean, I think the reduction in parking was done to facilitate the high street frontage, not having parking garage, so I'm willing to accept that.
Yep.
And then the other two are mostly about, the one about, the frontage is all occupied space, so that's fine, I can live with that, and then the last one's fine. And I think the only thing I would note is in some past projects, the city has advised that the support or lack of support on the variance was tied to the quality of the design, so I'm unenthused about the design, so, but if we want to separate the two, I'll support the variances, but that does not constitute any sort of support of the design for me.
I agree with Keone.
And of course, the changes in the design could result in coming back for additional variances, yes.
Yeah, and so sometimes we say that the design can impact the variances, and so we should be very mindful of that. So, for example, if we feel like the height could increase dramatically, therefore requiring a height variance or something like that, that's where we would say be very mindful of maybe jumping the gun too early, so to say.
But nothing we're doing would preclude that.
Right.
Do you want a motion?
That's up to you all.
Okay, I move that we approve each of these three zoning variances as written.
I will second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Parker.
I just have a quick question. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yep.
So I just was trying to understand how many spaces it was for, the commercial. Was it 20 spaces for one? Oh, per 150 square feet. Okay, 48 total spaces. And then that could change, right? Like if you wanted to end up giving more to the residential because the commercial space proved that it didn't need all of those spaces, you can change that.
We could change it, yes. I think, as I've said, we've done studies for both the amenity space, like a fit out type study for the amenity space and also the commercial space as one tenant. And that balance of square footage seems to work pretty well.
Okay. All right, then yes.
So what is your?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
And Mr. Supplin?
Yes.
Okay, so the variances pass. So now we can just talk about the design. So I'll just leave it here on the site or the first floor plan, and I can move to however the conversation's going.
Do you have any like parking for bicycles or?
We wouldn't have spaces within the garage for the residents.
Do you know where that would be on the plan?
We'll find a dead zone, so to speak, located in there. We don't have that because there's bike systems that we can use.
Sure.
So.
I think a lot of the comments that I brought up in February pretty much still hold true for me. I don't know that I can remember all of them, but I mean, I still believe that the architecture is really going to have to be pushed in order for me to part ways with the existing building. I think it's an important piece of fabric that if we lose that, it's just going to continue down the road. I am sympathetic about the parking and express that with the variance, approval of the variance, so I'm fine with that. It would be nice to see some type of ability though for anybody that's, cycling to the area to be able to park there. I can't do it in right of way, but you talked about some outdoor space, so maybe there's a way to accommodate some outdoor parking for visitors to the commercial space. And then, yeah, I'm anxious and excited to see what your next rendition of the elevations are.
So when you say push the design, can you be a little bit more specific?
Well, I mean, I echo a lot about what KB was talking about, and part of what I discussed in February, which was the 5+1, looks like you could put this building anywhere. It does not have any articulation that echoes anything that could, you know, be identifiable for High Street. It's uninspiring for me to see it because it looks like what's across the street, and it doesn't create any positive aesthetics for me for the High Street facades. I think the other thing too, I mentioned about a concern, even if we would go up higher, I appreciate that idea, and I appreciate the fact that you could step back, and I understand the economics, working in the industry, but I think there are some benefits to that because there would be a way perhaps to, you see in some places where you have an existing building and the new building becomes sort of a datum behind for which to promote the existing building. I would be appreciative of that, which would mean you'd have to step that front facade back. The other thing is if you go higher, I'm a little concerned about one elevator for that many units and 6 stories. So I'd be interested to see how that could be improved. I realize that's an interior building design component. So like I said, I'm anxious to see what could potentially be promoted next time you come.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the design sort of plays it safe, and the problem with that is it kind of looks like the thing across the street. It's got the same indents with regard to the way it meets the street. It's got the same mix of materials, the red and gray, and you know, I mean, it's not like the existing building on the site is great shakes, but on the other hand, it's been there a while. So if you're going to tear it down, at least for love of God, build something of equal value. It seems to me you could go either 2 routes. I think, you know, the building, the design you have in front of us today is slightly traditional. But as KB notes, it sort of deviates from, you know, if you're thinking of kind of the standard approach with the base condition in the middle and a piano and overlay, it's not there either. So there's no distinction between the base, which is typically higher, particularly in commercial space, and then the mid zone and maybe something interesting at the top. The others go more contemporary. I mean, the building immediately to the south, I think is one of the more ambitious and memorable projects in High Street because it does sort of, you know, push some things, and it does something interesting given that it's a 5/1. And so, you know, I think it's the one immediately to south, Belkis, 8th and High, the one we just saw.
Yeah, the one we just saw.
It's on the Google.
It's not.
Go, wow.
You can just, I hope you're not.
Yeah.
You could pull up the application. It was the one we just looked at.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, it's still trying to do some of the same things you all are doing. There are units with balconies, just like you all have, and, but it does, you know, the base condition is a little more transparent. It's a little more distinguished from the upper levels, and it takes a different sort of path to create something with a little bit of distinction. I think you've got a decent building that fits in the neighborhood, but, you know, I feel like it could do more than that. You could do something a little more interesting with it.
Can you go back to the elevation, their elevation? So I've got a question. One thing that, to the building that we were just looking at, the previous case, seems to be, one thing I guess I don't like about the elevation is that it seems like the ground floor is kind of squashed. I mean, if you're gonna do residential over commercial, or I think there ought to be some discernible height difference between what's commercial and what's residential. Here, the storefront is basically the same kind of elevational look as residential. I think it would benefit from. So I would certainly support. Are you at the limit for height right now?
Pretty close, yeah.
I mean, that's a no-brainer for me to support a higher building if you want that to be more distinguishable on the ground floor. The other thing, I mean, I'm not a construction person really at all, but I've just got a question that if you were to go higher, let's say, this is all just imaginary. You save the building, you go higher at High Street, but the entire building doesn't have to be higher. Maybe only a portion of it has to be higher to offset the additional cost of that type of construction. So I think you at least ought to consider it. And if nothing else, that's also opens up an opportunity, I think, to create a more interesting building. The one thing that's we finally got approved here at King and High, and I think if you look at how that building steps up and down, it really, I think, is starting to turn into a pretty interesting building now. So.
I think one of the challenges of adding more height and more units was the parking ratio. Am I then going to add another deck with parking where I have to go below grade to try to offset some of that cost? Because
I don't understand.
Marketability,
How's it?
marketability standpoint of a unit, we have to be able to provide a certain amount of parking to be able to get tenants to want to live there.
So
The building directly to the south has, you know, almost 1-to-1 ratio, I believe.
So you're not going into the ground for parking.
Correct. It's just
What is it? One level, or you go up a ramp?
just one
It's
level.
one level.
All right.
And I think we generally have been sympathetic to parking variances.
Sure.
Given that it's an urban area, desirably, when, you know, the comment is made about recognizing the number of people go by bicycle and making that parking for bicycles evident, working toward a world ideally where everybody doesn't need the car. But I think, you know, Carrie's point was the same one that I made earlier. Maybe his language was clearer, but the idea that the first floor is more monumental, is evident as a visual, as an aesthetic element, as well as the quality of space you get. I think in your case, it's relatively easy to do because all you're doing is adapting the stairwells to get to the next level. There aren't any other major architectural things that have to happen. The other thing is, again, when you're showing it out of context, the one thing that's legible in the elevation is that the streets don't meet High Street at a 90-degree angle. So the side street to the north is at a different angle, and High Street doesn't parallel Wall Street Alley. So there's nothing in the design of the building that would make that evident. So everything is straightening itself out, right? And one of the opportunities that any designer, an urban designer would note, but there's no evidence in your facade, is that 8th Avenue comes into your building facade, not right at the center, slightly south of center. And wouldn't it be wonderful if by riding my bicycle down 8th Avenue, when I see your building, I'm noting a visual recognition at that point. Maybe that's where a door is, maybe something significant happens at that point. That's how great cities are designed, right? These correlations between the movements of the streets at an urban scale and the architecture that responds to those things. 8th Avenue is probably not going to go away. So the idea that, but on your facade, the generic nature of and the kind of ubiquity and standard pattern means that the facade is not recognizing any of the contextual elements around it. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
And for me, you know, I look at your massing studies and I almost like the massing studies better than the played out facades with brick up to a certain limit. I mean, here there's like something more legible, malleable, simple, clear. I realize it's incomplete, but I would start with that base and start thinking about how to materialize it in a way that's aesthetically more interesting and maybe uses some of the cues of the area around it. The other concern I have is, and we've seen this problem before, and I don't know if I've ever seen a great resolution of it, but the party deck that's at the level of all of those residential units that look out onto that amenity deck. That seems like a real problem.
On the courtyard side?
On the courtyard area where you're relying on getting daylight into all of those single loaded corridor or double loaded corridor apartments, right? They all look into the amenity deck. So they're, especially the units on the first housing level, the second level of the building, their privacy is compromised by social activity happening in that space, and however windows are going to be designed to that. To those units.
It's a pretty common detail. A lot of times, you know, we'll do something on the amenity deck itself that creates a privacy zone between the actual wall of the unit and where anybody could walk.
Yeah.
You know, because there's typically a patio for the unit, and then we would sometimes, it depends on the size and scale and shape, whether it's a fence or a landscape or something like that, provide a buffer zone.
And of course, you're not showing that today, But ideally, when you do come back with that part, it'd be great to show the models that you're referring to that are the kind of the best case scenarios as well as you can figure out how to do. That would help the discussion.
Sure. One comment about the comment about, doing more of our buildings, setting things back to greater than on High Street. The potential problematic thing with that is that you have a roof right in front of your units now at that point, and there becomes a tendency for mechanical units to fall on those roofs. And so we would really not want to have that.
There are also lots of solutions to that.
There are.
City of
There are.
Chicago is the best example, but there's so many more green roofs emerging now. So I don't think that's a contemporary problem. In the past, that used to be the case, but there are a lot of ways you can resolve that with a desirable surface to look down onto.
Yeah, I think that scenario would end up in less dense of a site as well. So that's something that would obviously have to be considered.
To me, and looking at the current configuration, I think KB's initial comments and Keone referred to them as well, of emphasis on the ground floor as a more monumental base, and then looking at the top and relating to that, I think it's a real opportunity for some interest there. And there's certainly some tradition in Columbus of buildings with some interesting cornice details that perhaps could be in general referenced and create maybe pretty subtle, but some sort of regional feel for that treatment at the top. And yes, that building does come to mind.
Well, we're heading the traditional route. Please keep in mind that Justin's family, they owned the properties directly across the street on the north. So there was some intent to try to create some harmony between the two. And so
Can you show that? Can you show that visually?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You mean in like the renderings and stuff?
Is it the one that Belkis has right now?
I mean, that's a really nice building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can get harmony with that, great. You're not there yet.
It's also the town tree.
I actually like the color
Yeah.
of that building as well.
Yeah, if you go back to the street view, it's the townhomes down Ninth, and then our office is just beyond that. And some of the direction we kind of gave at the beginning was to try to take some of those elements and translate it to this project.
I mean, there's a fine line between taking cues from the site and basically ending up with a mishmash of the site. So I think your architect's probably got the right instincts. The building to the north is a very nice building, but it's less fussy in some ways. It's sort of, what makes it interesting is kind of the clarity of the form, and then against that, the strength of the cutouts in the front. So I certainly support using that building as a kind of model, but I would be careful about telling your architect to pick things from here, there, and every which where. I mean, I think that might be why you're getting a building that is a little non-distinct.
Can you see the proportions of base, middle, top on that building?
Oh, yeah. That's certainly an approach, it doesn't necessarily say that's what you have to do every single time you have a podium building. There's sometimes that horizontal line at the podium line becomes too strong. So I think it's a balance.
Do you feel like you have enough material, or would you like more?
Everybody spoke, right?
We did.
Yeah,
Wait, can't wait to see what you come up with.
sounds good.
Okay.
Oh. Would you like to-
So time was perfect.
You missed all the fun.
See you, Dave.
We're done.
Good work.
All right, well, I mean, did you want to,
I think his work here is done.
oh.
Okay.
Very good.
We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Which takes us back to UID 23-04-007, 122 West Ninth Avenue.
Yeah, so 1 West Ninth Avenue is a parcel that contains an existing residential structure with a parking lot to the west. And the owner is working through splitting the lot, splitting the parcel in two. Today, the applicant is seeking conceptual design feedback to construct a new 3-unit, 12-bed apartment building on the parking lot portion of the existing property. The building will be 3 stories or about 32 feet tall, includes porches for each unit, and some green space with 8 stacked parking spaces in the rear at a rate of 0.66 spaces per bed. Proposed materials include a mix of fiber cement lap siding and stucco with DIFS veneers. And the applicant anticipates that the variances will be needed and is working with BCS staff to confirm a final list. I'm just going to go to the street view so you can see what we're talking about. It's like, so this is West 9th Avenue here. And the site, this is this, oh my gosh. Second. Okay. So this is the site. It's this gravel space here. So this is all one lot. They're going to split it about where these cars are parked essentially. And then in this gravelly, grassy space, build. So that is the gist of that. And then in looking at their materials, again, these are conceptual. Here's a site plan, so you can see the orientation of each unit varies a little bit. But each unit does have a porch space. And then going into the rear of the lot, you have a little bit of green space with those eight stacked parking spaces. And then this is the first floor plan, second floor plan, attic plan. And then we have the elevation. So this is the south elevation, which is the front that faces the street. East elevation, so you see that middle unit there. And then the north elevation, so this is what would face the rear yard and the parking. And then this is the west elevation. And then this is sort of like a streetscape elevation, so you can see how it compares to the properties on either side. And after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the university district plan. The plan recommends this site for higher intensity residential uses, which calls for a maximum FAR of 0.6, height of 45 feet, parking at a rate of 0.75 spaces per bed, and a minimum of 8% of the total lot area to be preserved as landscape open space behind the principal structure. Furthermore, the plan recommends that the overall depth of a building should be no more than 2.5 times the building's overall width, that the primary facade addresses the primary street, and have a high level of design that the scale of new buildings, windows, and doors be influenced by the surrounding contributing residential buildings. Lastly, the plan calls for porches or stoops on the front entrances, that landscaping and street trees be included, and that parking be located to the rear. As such, staff generally supports the conceptual proposal. Staff notes that although the length of the structure is slightly more than 2.5 times the width, staff recognizes that the length is comparable to the lengths of adjacent structures. As the proposal develops, staff recommends that the applicant include a shade tree in the front setback or a street tree, landscaping in front of the porch areas, and exterior lighting that minimizes light spill. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I swear you in? I assume there's going to be, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I did.
Would you like to supplement the city's remarkable assessment of the?
Yes, she's doing a really good job.
Are you trying to encourage baby?
Since we're here for conceptual, I welcome any feedback based on current layouts. Right now it's 3 units, 4 beds each. Each unit is essentially identical, just rotated slightly differently as you move through the site. It's pretty in line with the typology along the north side of West 9th Avenue and the types of structures that belong there.
In general, I like it. I know the composition's pretty nice, space is good. I've got a couple minor things. Don't love the ethos.
Where is the ethos?
It's the stickly stuff on the left.
Yeah, so the taller portions, even on all sides of the building,
Yeah.
that's IFAS, and then you have the lap siding on the shorter portions.
I mean, I'd certainly support, and I get it, for its cost never, I'd certainly encourage, fiber cement, maybe it's a different kind of pattern, maybe it's board matted or something, so you get the contrast, but I certainly prefer that to the ethos. The only other real comment I have is I kind of like the play you're doing where at the base on that elevation on the left side, you go from the paired windows to the split ones at the bottom. It's still a little too close. I feel like if you're gonna play in great variation, you need to have a little more. I'm not sure what the answer is, but the other elevation I noticed was like the west elevation. Like actually, I kind of like this elevation, but the one thing is the window, first floor, right-hand side, again, it seems like rather than just being the same window, but out of the line, it should be doing something a little different. But those are minor things. I think in general, I'm supportive. I think it's nicely composed. It's way better than what's there. In general, it's nice design.
And are the double hungs, except for the ones without the double hung indication, are those, what's going on with those windows?
The ones
The
that.
windows on this elevation that don't show up as double hung, are they
Those are
fixed
case-
panels?
Those are case panels.
They're fixed, so they don't operate.
They operate their case,
Swing out.
And why the difference?
egress.
They have to be egress windows, so that,
Yeah, for
Okay.
bedrooms.
and then what's implied by when you think about the piece of cornice on the higher levels? Is that actually clear story glazing?
No, so that is going to be either fiber cement trim or wood trim that's going to be painted.
I have a question.
Before we go
Oh,
on,
sorry, go ahead, Kate.
that's a really strange detail. And what's that about?
The cornice?
Yeah, so I'm looking at that piece compared to the cornices on the lower ones. And these hang out further, right? Are they masking the slope of the roof behind it?
Well, no, so it's not like a pitched roof or anything. It's a flat roof behind it.
It is.
Yeah. I'm not,
So the flat roof is actually sloped because there's no such thing as a flat roof, right?
quarter
Okay.
inch per foot, essentially flat.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out, because that's an unusual articulation of a detail, the amount of overhang that, you render correctly to show it shaded. It's not something that I recognize. Looks unusual to me, where a lot of the other components, the architecture, the porch detailing, the kinds of windows are all within a language. So those elements are outside that language. So I just want to know what you're thinking. What would they be like as color? Is there a different color to those?
Yeah, I was assuming there would be a different color for that portion of the cornice. In each, where we have the stucco, where we have the lap siding and trim work, it wouldn't all be monochromatic or anything. There would be color variation along the different materials and different pieces of trim.
Are there gutters?
There's collection boxes and downspouts on the west side.
So there's not going to be a gutter along that edge?
No.
Yeah, it just looks weird to me. Yeah, those make sense. So the water collection on those stepped up roof elements are taking water to the next level down and then they channel into the downspouts?
Yeah, so it slopes back toward the center of the building and it slopes to the west.
On the east side, the walkway that gives you access there, will that extend all the way to Ninth? In front?
No, it'll connect to the front sidewalk to that, yeah. So that sidewalk along the plan
Oh,
south,
okay.
it connects in front of where the porch is for the first unit. And then that connects to Ninth.
I had a couple questions about, just like trying to understand your pathways, so, to make sure that people don't get confused with like delivery packages and, everything else that is delivered, do you know how are you gonna be able to decipher like where the units are? Like, is it gonna be very obvious when you're walking on that path that that there's a unit down the alleyway, or, I just didn't know.
For like wayfinding?
Yeah, because it looks like this middle porch area, unit B.
Mhm.
I just was wondering, like, one, it looks like it's just a little bit close to that property line if somebody were to like have that, be accessed as their front door. I just was trying to think about how that would, correlate with like somebody who was trying to make a delivery or something. And then same thing with, the parking spaces off to the right where they go to that unit to unit C. Is that like, is there a main door they have to go through the porch? Is that how that's
Yes.
set up? Okay, I would love to see like the suggestion, that Belkis had mentioned about providing, landscaping. I think that that will help me better understand just the layout of this, because right now, it doesn't really look like it's clearly defined for me as to like how that would look, with the 3 units, and then one of the units having their front door in the alleyway.
Right, yeah, that's, typically I don't like to design buildings and have that side entrance, but it is pretty typical along that north side of West Ninth. And I don't know if they have problems with packages at the moment being delivered. but-
Yeah, sure. I just was wondering because of the, like, what the exterior lighting would be on the building, so that way it doesn't go into those people's windows when they're walking past to their front door. I'm like, just trying to think about proximity, because it looks like they have to share the sidewalk. And then like, then one person can go straight to their front door and the other person has to go all the way around the corner. I'm just wondering like what windows they pass on the way, because that's gonna be a really frequent spot. And
Sure, yeah, well, living spaces and kitchen spaces are all on the first floor, bedrooms are above.
Okay.
There's no first floor bedrooms.
Okay.
Semi-private, not fully private on the first floor.
I guess my question about the sidewalk going to Ninth really it also addresses that kind of issue of the relationship of the side entrance to Ninth as opposed to being so tucked away. But I don't know what.
Typically, we'd have dressing on the front of the building for the one unit, and then we'd have something off to the side indicating that the other entry is around the side.
And they have parking on the alley, so they have a sidewalk. The north side or the south side? It's the north
The
side.
parking's
Parking's
north.
And then my other comment would be, I'd like to see either bigger windows if possible, or different shapes of windows for those walking areas. If it could provide more privacy and still let in a lot of natural light. That would just be something visually that I think could be appealing. Actually, I don't know if everybody else agrees with me on that one.
Okay, my turn.
Go for it.
Yeah, so, I like the project. I think, it has nice proportions. Couple of questions on the site plan, Marcus, if you could go to that. This is just, have you guys been through zoning clearance and everything? So you know you have to do that, right?
Yep.
To get your variances. Obviously, bicycle parking might be an interesting thing to have on site. Where you're gonna do your dumpster, is that combined, is that why?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Are they sharing the dumpster with the one adjacent and next door? Okay. And then obviously we've got the stacked parking, that'll have to work itself out, right? And then if you go to the elevations, so the height, it's stated as 3210, but that 3210 shows with the existing, first level floor at 100. So you have to add in the distance from the first floor level to the grade to that height. So just make sure you keep that in mind when you're applying for you're still well with under the 45 feet, so that's not a problem. As far as what Kiani was saying about, the windows being separated. There's lots of ways to solve that. If you would go with a board and batten, maybe there is some type of a center pier to kind of make it look wider, or you add a third window there, right?
Yep.
So there's ways like that that you can help create a different articulation on that first level, to make that, feel different. But I'm supportive of the project.
Good idea.
Belkis, could you go back to the site plan, please?
Yeah.
I agree with all the comments. I like the project. I think it's nicely proportioned and the massing is very, very nice. My only question, or I guess point is at the back of the parking, that's kind of a weird triangular shaped bed that you're gonna be left with. And what I worry about on any project like this is basically ending up with two big patches of mud. So how could the sidewalks be arranged such that you minimize the opportunity for people to be cutting across there? Because it just ends up being a mess. So I can't believe I'm gonna say, first off, how are you on your landscape, the percentage that's supposed to be dedicated to non-paved?
We're good. We're,
Like you have any,
12%.
do you have any room to give?
A little bit.
Well, the reason I say that is you might consider, it doesn't have to be 4 feet wide, but a narrow walk here where if these people come, they don't have to cut across, you at least give them the opportunity to walk on a solid surface. And maybe this walk, if you have room, maybe there's one walk that does that, and maybe this continues to pick these people up. I mean, I worry about every time you do that. I mean, you might as well just turn it into gravel because nothing's gonna grow there. People are walking on it constantly, so. I just think about long-term maintenance. I mean, I'm certainly not encouraging everything to be paved, but at the same time, give it some thought.
Yeah, it's an interesting site because the house on the corner is pulled forward. So when you're on Hunter, you'll see almost the entire backside of the building. And I think most people coming to and from class are going to cut through that property
Yeah.
to get to the building.
How are the windows aligned with that middle porch to that building that you have that's, the existing building, I guess, is that to the south? No, to the west, yeah. Do you know?
The window heights,
Well, so that inside porch, if you go back to the Google view, sorry. See right there where the windows are?
which
No,
building?
no, on the side of the building. Nope, yep,
Oh.
right there. So that's kind of at the inside of the porch, right?
Can you, Bill, please, can you bring the site plan, please?
Yeah.
So the way that I put
Oh, it
that
is.
porch, I set it off to the right, so it's
Yeah.
far back on that existing adjacent building as possible.
So it's just the two windows there in the living space. So
Yeah.
they basically complement each other.
No, just can you go back to street view, please? And then go around the corner, around this brick building corner. Oh, okay, never mind. I was wondering if that was on your property, but it's not. That's on the neighbor's property. You think?
That's.
The tree,
Yeah. I think it's in your neighbor's backyard.
I believe it's.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I was afraid it was gonna come out. Be a shame.
Oh, we'll take it out.
I feel like you have gotten the comments you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, can I just add that? I think a visit to the site really does reinforce the good proportions that you're projecting here. It is close to where I live, so it was easy to visit this morning. But I'm really convinced that your proportions are really appropriate.
Cool.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Easy agenda today.
Last week's was even easier.
For coming in.
Thank you. Which moves us to staff approved applications. Anything seriously interesting on that front?
Not really. A lot of graphics.
Yeah.
They've all been straightforward. I brought that one to you tonight because the size is a little bit larger than the guidelines specified, so.
I move to approve. Second?
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Sublett.
Yes.
Thank you, that passes. Are we adjourned?
Let's do it.
Okay,
Wow.
thank you. 5:09.
It's
Not
amazing.
bad.
Good job, guys.
Has anyone gone by that building? I brought it up in the one application on King and High. I